Ethan woke up before the sun, just like he did every morning on the ranch. The sky outside his small wooden house was still dark, and the air carried the cool smell of early dawn. He stretched his tired muscles and listened to the quiet sounds around him. Somewhere outside, the cattle were slowly waking up too. The ranch was peaceful, the way it always was at this hour. He walked toward Caleb's room to wake him up for breakfast. Caleb was 7 years old, full of energy, and always ready to follow his father around the ranch. Ethan pushed open the door with a smile on his face, expecting to see the boy bouncing out of bed the way he usually did. But when he entered the room, he found Caleb sitting silently on the edge of the mattress, rubbing his left shoulder as if something was bothering him. Ethan stopped and looked at him carefully. "You feeling all right, buddy?" he asked in a soft voice. Caleb didn't answer right away. He simply shrugged and kept touching the same spot on his shoulder. His face looked a little tired, and his eyes seemed heavier than usual. "I'm okay, Pa," he finally whispered. "My back just feels weird." Ethan walked closer and placed his hand gently on the boy's head. Caleb's hair was messy from sleep, and he leaned into his father's touch like he needed comfort. "Did you bump into something?" Ethan asked. "I don't know," Caleb said. "It just hurts a little." Ethan checked quickly but didn't see anything unusual. Maybe it was just a mosquito bite or the way he slept. Kids sometimes woke up with strange aches that disappeared by lunchtime, so Ethan smiled and tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe you slept like a pretzel last night," he teased. Caleb gave a tiny smile, but it faded quickly. Ethan noticed, and something in his chest tightened. He decided not to worry too much yet. He guided Caleb to the small kitchen where breakfast was waiting: simple eggs, warm bread, and a glass of milk. The sun was rising slowly, painting light across the wooden table. Ethan watched Caleb carefully as they ate. Usually, Caleb talked the entire time, asking questions, telling stories, or laughing at small things. Today, he was quiet. Too quiet. After breakfast, they headed to the barn together. It was part of their routine. Caleb loved helping his father feed the animals. He held the small bucket of grain while Ethan carried the larger one. But as they walked, Ethan noticed Caleb wince slightly with each step, as if something on his back was pulling or stinging. "You sure you're all right?" Ethan asked again. Caleb nodded but kept his lips pressed tightly together. Ethan didn't push him further, though the worry inside him grew a little bigger. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and warm sunlight settled around them. The cattle mooed softly, and Caleb tried his best to keep up. But while reaching up to hand some grain to his father, he suddenly froze. His eyes widened, and his breath caught in his throat. "Pa," he whispered. "Pa, something's growing on my back." His voice carried a mix of fear and confusion, something Ethan had never heard from him before. Ethan quickly put down the bucket. He knelt beside Caleb and turned him gently. "What do you mean something's growing?" he asked in a calm voice, trying not to scare the child. Caleb grabbed the back of his shirt and lifted it a little. "It hurts, and it feels big now." Ethan lifted the shirt carefully. The moment he saw what was underneath, a chill went through his body. There, on Caleb's left upper back, was a small swollen bump. It looked round, warm, and tight, almost like something pushing up from inside the skin. Yesterday, there had been nothing there. Ethan's heart sank. He didn't show it, of course. He didn't want to frighten Caleb, so he kept his voice gentle. "It looks a little swollen, buddy. Maybe it's just a bite. We'll take care of it." But deep inside, he felt a strange heaviness. The bump looked unusual, too big, too sudden. Caleb's eyes were filled with worry. "Will it go away?" "Of course it will," Ethan replied quickly, trying to sound confident. "I'll check it again later. Maybe you're just reacting to something." Caleb nodded, trusting his father completely. The rest of the morning passed slower than usual. Ethan tried to continue with the ranch work, but he kept glancing at Caleb. The boy tried to act normal, feeding chickens, carrying small tools, sweeping dry leaves. But every few minutes he paused, touching his back as if something was bothering him. Ethan noticed how the boy's shoulders seemed tense, and how he sometimes pressed his lips together as though trying not to cry. Every time Ethan asked, "You okay?" And every time Caleb said, "I'm fine, Pa." But Ethan could tell he wasn't. By noon, the sun was high, and the heat made the ranch shimmer. Ethan decided to let Caleb rest. "Why don't you sit inside for a while?" he suggested. "Maybe read one of your books." Caleb didn't argue, which was unusual. Normally, he insisted on tagging along. But this time, he walked inside quietly. Ethan stood for a moment in the yard, wiping sweat from his forehead and taking a long breath. Something didn't feel right. The bump, Caleb's silence, the discomfort. None of it made sense. Maybe he should check again. Maybe he should drive into town to get it looked at. But then he reminded himself that kids got strange reactions all the time. Bugs, scratches, allergies, anything could cause swelling. He tried to push away the fear rising in his chest. However, as the afternoon passed, the worry kept creeping back. Ethan checked on Caleb every now and then. Each time he found the boy lying on the couch, breathing slowly, eyes half closed. He wasn't crying, but he looked tired, far more tired than a child should ever look. Around mid-afternoon, Caleb walked back outside with slow steps. He tugged on Ethan's sleeve weakly and said, "Pa, it hurts more now." Ethan stopped everything he was doing. The boy's voice had changed. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. It was a plea for help. "Come here," Ethan said gently, kneeling and turning him around again. When he lifted the shirt this time, his breath caught in his throat. The bump had grown. Not a lot, but enough to be noticeable. It looked redder, warmer, and more stretched, like something was pushing outward with force. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't want to frighten Caleb, so he kept his voice steady. "It's swelling more. We're going to keep an eye on it, okay?" Caleb looked up with wide, scared eyes. "Why is it happening, Pa?" "I don't know yet," Ethan admitted softly. "But I'm right here. I won't let anything happen to you." The boy nodded again, trusting him without question. But inside, Ethan felt helpless. The ranch was far from town. The roads weren't always easy, and the nearest clinic was more than an hour away. For a moment, he wondered whether he should have taken Caleb earlier. Was he being careless? Was he telling himself it was nothing because he didn't want to panic? He looked at his son again, small, pale, and trying to be brave. "We'll see how it looks by evening," Ethan said gently, patting Caleb's shoulder. "If it gets worse, I'll take you to town." Caleb nodded, but he clung to Ethan's arm for a moment longer before letting go. The rest of the day passed slowly, as if time itself was worried. Ethan couldn't focus on chores anymore. Even the sounds of the ranch, the cattle, the wind, the creaking barn, felt distant. All he could think about was the bump and the fear in Caleb's voice. Every hour he checked again. Every hour the bump seemed slightly larger. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft orange and pink colors, Ethan felt a knot forming in his chest. He had hoped the swelling would go down on its own, but it hadn't. It had grown, and so had his fear. Caleb walked toward him slowly, holding his arm and trying not to cry. "Pa," he whispered again. "It hurts a lot now." Ethan bent down and hugged him tightly. "I know, buddy. I'm here." The boy leaned into him, trembling slightly. In that moment, the quiet ranch suddenly felt heavy with worry. The peaceful day had changed into something uncertain, and Ethan realized the next hours would change everything. Whatever was happening to Caleb was not small anymore. It was real, growing, and frightening, and he had no idea what would happen next. The evening came slowly, and with every passing minute, Ethan grew more worried. The sky outside turned a soft golden color, then shifted into deeper shades as the sun slipped behind the distant hills. The warm light filled the ranch, but inside Ethan's heart, nothing felt warm. He kept glancing at Caleb, who sat quietly near the window, holding his shoulder with small, tired hands. Ethan had seen Caleb tired before, and even sick before, but tonight felt different. There was something in the boy's silence that Ethan could not ignore anymore. Normally, Caleb talked even when he didn't feel good. He would describe his dreams or ask questions about the sky or the animals, but now he didn't say anything unless Ethan spoke first. And every word he spoke sounded weaker than the last. "Caleb," Ethan said gently, walking toward him. "Let me check your back again." Caleb nodded without arguing. That alone told Ethan how bad he must be feeling. The boy slowly turned around, gripping the armrest for support. Ethan lifted his shirt carefully. The bump was bigger now. It wasn't enormous, but it had grown clearly since the morning. The skin around it looked stretched, warm, and slightly red. Ethan touched the area lightly, just enough to feel the temperature, and Caleb flinched. "Sorry, buddy," Ethan whispered. "It's okay," Caleb said, but his voice shook a little. Ethan felt something sink in his chest. He realized that waiting any longer might be dangerous. Maybe it was an allergic reaction, maybe it was an infection. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew one thing for certain. Caleb needed help, and he needed it soon. He walked toward the window and looked outside. Dark clouds were gathering in the distance. The wind was picking up, brushing through the trees and causing them to sway gently at first, then more strongly. A storm was coming. He could smell the rain in the air, thick and heavy. The main road to town was long and partly unpaved. When it rained hard, the road usually turned muddy, sometimes even impossible to drive through. Ethan felt his stomach twist as he watched the sky. He didn't want to take risks, but he couldn't ignore the swelling on Caleb's back either. He turned around and saw Caleb curled slightly on the couch, hugging himself lightly as if trying to reduce the pain. That sight pushed Ethan into action. "Caleb," he said, trying to sound calm even though his voice trembled a bit. "We're going to drive to town. I think it's better if the doctor takes a look at you." Caleb looked up slowly. His eyes were tired, but he trusted his father completely. He tried to stand but had to hold the couch for support. That small gesture stabbed Ethan's heart with worry. Ethan quickly helped him. "Easy there," he whispered. "We'll take it slow." He wrapped Caleb in a small blanket because the air was getting colder. Then he picked him up gently, the way he used to when Caleb was much smaller. Even though Caleb had grown since then, tonight he felt as light as a feather. Ethan realized it was because Caleb wasn't holding his body firmly the way he usually did. He was resting fully against his father's chest. As Ethan stepped outside, the wind blew harder, brushing dust across the yard. The sky looked darker now, and the first raindrops touched his arms. He hurried toward the old truck parked near the barn, but when he tried to start the truck, the engine made a struggling sound. He tried again. Another rough noise, but no start. Ethan felt sweat gather on his forehead, not from heat, but from fear and frustration. He turned the key a third time. The engine stuttered, coughed, and then went silent. No, come on," Ethan whispered to himself. Caleb watched him with worried eyes. "Pa, is it not working?" Ethan forced a smile. "Just needs a moment," he said, though he knew that wasn't the truth. He tried again, pressing the pedal gently, but the truck refused to start. The storm was getting stronger by the second. The wind howled softly, and the rain began falling steadily. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't want Caleb to see how stressed he was. The only other vehicle was the old tractor. but it was too slow and not safe for such a long trip in the rain. The neighbor's house was miles away, and the path toward it often flooded during storms. For a few seconds, Ethan felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He stood beside the truck, holding Caleb close, feeling the raindrops hit both their faces. He wished the bump was something small. He wished he could just take Caleb to the clinic quickly and get an answer. But the storm was trapping them. "Pa," Caleb whispered again. "It hurts more now." Ethan pressed his forehead gently against the side of Caleb's head. "I know, buddy," he said softly. "I'm right here." He carried Caleb back into the house to avoid the rain. The storm outside became louder, rattling the windows and making the lights flicker. Ethan placed Caleb carefully on the couch again and covered him with blankets. He fetched a damp cloth and lightly pressed it on the swollen area. Caleb closed his eyes, letting out a small breath. For a moment, Ethan thought the warmth of the blanket and the coolness of the cloth might help. But after a while, Caleb curled up again, whispering, "It still hurts." Ethan's hands shook as he removed the cloth. The bump looked even more swollen now, almost as if the skin were tightening around it. He didn't understand how something could grow so quickly. He checked the house phone to call health services, but the storm had knocked out the line. No signal, no help. The fear inside him turned into a heavy weight. He remembered the day Caleb was born, how he had promised to take care of him. He remembered the moments they spent repairing fences together, Caleb laughing, asking questions about everything. He remembered the way Caleb would run toward him after finishing small chores, proud of helping out. And now, that same little boy was lying on the couch, unable to stand properly, unable to smile, fighting something neither of them understood. Ethan walked to the kitchen, trying to think clearly. He searched his memory for remedies his late wife used to talk about, herbs, compresses, warm drinks. He prepared something mild and soothing, and gave it to Caleb. It helped a little, but not enough. The swelling remained, almost pulsing visibly under the skin. Hours passed slowly. The storm grew stronger. Thunder echoed across the fields, and the roof creaked under the pressure of rain. Ethan stayed beside Caleb the whole time, holding his hand, whispering comforting words even when he himself felt far from calm. At one point, Caleb opened his eyes and said, "Pa, why is this happening?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't know yet, buddy, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." "Will it stop?" Caleb asked in a shaky voice. "Yes," Ethan said softly, brushing his hair off his forehead. "I won't let anything happen to you." The boy nodded slowly, trusting every word. But inside, Ethan felt fear rise up again. What if the bump grew even more? What if Caleb's fever got worse? What if the storm didn't stop soon enough? He checked the windows. The wind was calming slightly. The rain, though still strong, didn't seem as harsh as before. Maybe, just maybe, he could try the truck again. Or maybe he could walk. He looked at Caleb's small, tired face and realized he would do anything. Walk miles in the rain, carry him through the mud, anything, to make sure the boy got help. But that moment was for the next part of the journey. For now, all Ethan could do was stay close, be strong, and fight the fear growing inside him with every minute. The ranch house, once full of life and comfort, now felt like a silent waiting room, waiting for the storm to pass, waiting for help to arrive, waiting for the moment Ethan would have to make a difficult decision. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a father sat beside his child, holding his hand tightly, praying silently, hoping for the courage to face whatever was coming next. The storm had already been roaring for hours when Ethan finally made up his mind. He had been sitting beside Caleb, watching the rise and fall of his small breaths, listening to the rain beat against the windows like 1,000 tiny drums. Every minute felt heavier than the last. The swelling on Caleb's back wasn't slowing down. His fever wasn't dropping, and the helplessness in Ethan's chest was growing too fast for him to ignore. He looked out the window again. The wind wasn't shaking the trees as wildly as before. The rain was still steady, but its force had softened. It wasn't perfect weather, not even close, but it was enough for Ethan to try something. He turned back toward Caleb, who was lying on the couch, wrapped in blankets. The boy's cheeks were warmer than they should be, and his eyelids fluttered open slowly when he felt Ethan's presence. "Pa?" Caleb whispered, his voice thin. Ethan knelt down beside him and held his hand. "Buddy, we're going to get help." Caleb blinked, trying to focus on his father's face. "Are we going to the doctor now?" "Yes," Ethan said gently. "We're going to walk to Mr. Harris's ranch. It's the closest place. He'll help us get to the clinic." Caleb opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again, too tired to say more. He simply nodded, his trust resting fully in Ethan's hands. Ethan wrapped Caleb in the warmest blanket he could find. Then he took another blanket and draped it over his own shoulders. The house felt strangely quiet as he prepared to step outside. Quiet in a way that made Ethan realize how much he wished someone else were with him. But it was just him and Caleb, the way it had been for years. He lifted Caleb gently into his arms. The boy was light, not because he was small, but because he was tired. Ethan held him close, feeling the warmth of his son's fever against his chest. It made him walk faster, as if the heat were a reminder that time was running too quickly. When he stepped outside, the cool air hit his face. The rain was falling steadily, tapping against his skin like small, cold fingers, but it wasn't strong enough to stop him. The sky was dark, covered in thick gray clouds that made the world look dim, even though it wasn't fully night. Ethan tightened his hold on Caleb and started walking. The mud beneath his boots was soft and slippery, but he moved carefully, step by step, making sure he didn't fall. The blanket around Caleb kept him warm, but Ethan could feel the boy shiver occasionally. "Pa," Caleb whispered after a few minutes, his voice barely above the sound of the rain. "It hurts." Ethan pressed his cheek against the top of Caleb's head. "I know, buddy," he answered softly. "We're getting closer. Just stay with me." Caleb didn't reply, but he rested his head against Ethan's shoulder. The boy's small hand curled into Ethan's shirt, holding on to him with the little strength he had left. Ethan kept walking. The path to the neighbor's ranch stretched across open land. During sunny days, it was a beautiful sight. Wide fields, tall grass waving in the wind, birds flying overhead. But tonight, everything looked shadowy and washed out. The earth was wet, the grass heavy with rain, and the air smelled like wet soil and storm clouds. Ethan's legs began to ache, but he didn't slow down. Every time he felt tired, he reminded himself of the swelling on Caleb's back, the fever, the soft trembling in his son's hands. Those reminders gave him strength. Halfway through the walk, the rain suddenly came down harder for a few minutes. The wind picked up again, pushing against him like a heavy hand trying to shove him backward. Ethan bent his body slightly to shield Caleb from the wind. The blanket around them fluttered, and Caleb let out a small sound, almost a whimper. "It's okay," Ethan said, adjusting his grip. "I've got you. I'm not letting go." He kept repeating those words silently in his mind. "I'm not letting go. Not ever." The path grew steeper in certain spots. Mud tried to pull at his boots, and the ground felt slippery. At one point, Ethan's foot slid a little too far, and he stumbled forward. His heart jumped to his throat as he tightened his arms around Caleb. He managed to steady himself. But the sudden movement made Caleb wince. "Sorry," Ethan whispered immediately. "I'm sorry, buddy." Caleb didn't say anything. His eyes were half closed now. His breathing was slower than before. The sight made Ethan's chest tighten with fear. He kept walking, faster than before, even though his legs trembled with exhaustion. After what felt like an hour, though Ethan knew it must have been less, he finally saw a distant light through the rain. It flickered softly, glowing like a small star. It was the porch light of Mr. Harris's ranch house. "Caleb," Ethan whispered with relief. "We're almost there. Just a little more." Caleb stirred slightly but didn't open his eyes fully. His head rested weakly against Ethan's shoulder. As Ethan approached the house, the rain softened again. He trudged up the muddy driveway, his boots soaked, his clothes heavy with water. The porch light illuminated the raindrops falling around him, creating a soft glow. He reached the front door and knocked urgently. A few seconds later, the door opened. Mr. Harris, a tall, older man with kind but tired eyes, looked surprised when he saw Ethan standing there in the rain, holding Caleb close. "Ethan," he said, stepping forward. "What on earth—" "Please," Ethan interrupted, out of breath. "I need help. Caleb's not well. Something is swelling on his back and it's getting worse." Mr. Harris didn't hesitate for even a second. "Come inside. Quickly." Ethan stepped into the warm house, and the sudden change in temperature made Caleb shiver slightly. Mr. Harris closed the door behind them and guided Ethan to a couch. Ethan gently laid Caleb down, keeping him wrapped in the blanket. Mr. Harris bent down and examined Caleb with worried eyes. "He's burning up," he said softly. "We have to take him to the clinic." Ethan nodded. "I tried the truck, it wouldn't start." "Mine will," Mr. Harris replied. "The roads will be rough, but we'll make it." While Mr. Harris grabbed his keys and jacket, Ethan stayed with Caleb, holding his hand and brushing damp hair away from his forehead. "You're doing good, buddy," Ethan whispered. "We're getting help now." Caleb opened his eyes just a little and looked at Ethan with trust still shining beneath the exhaustion. "Pa, you didn't leave me." Ethan's heart softened. "I never will," he said. Moments later, Mr. Harris returned. He and Ethan carefully carried Caleb to the truck, making sure he was comfortable in the back seat. The engine started immediately, its steady hum sounding like hope. As they drove through the stormy night, Ethan kept a hand on Caleb's back, whispering gentle words. The road was slippery and dark, the headlights cutting through rain, but Mr. Harris drove with steady hands and determination. When they finally reached the small clinic in town, lights were still on inside. The moment the staff saw Caleb, they reacted quickly. Nurses brought a stretcher. Doctors asked questions. They guided Ethan to stay close. Ethan walked beside Caleb as they took him in, holding the boy's hand until the very last moment they allowed him. Caleb looked at him with tired eyes. "Pa?" "Yes, buddy?" "You came with me." "Always," Ethan whispered. Then Caleb was taken into an exam room, and Ethan stood outside the door, his heart heavy with worry. He had done everything he could. He had carried his son through the storm, step by step, with nothing but love pushing him forward. Now, all he could do was wait. He sank to his knees, his hands covering his face, not from despair, but from the overwhelming fear and hope twisting together inside him. Part 4 begins with a new morning in Ayan's life, a day that looks normal from the outside but carries a quiet storm inside his heart. He wakes up early, just as he always does, but something feels different. The air feels calm yet heavy, like the silence right before rain. As he sits on the edge of his bed, he thinks about the long journey he has traveled. Every struggle, every small victory, every step that brought him here. He realizes that life has been teaching him lessons one by one, slowly shaping him into a stronger person. Ayan stands and walks toward the window. Outside, the world is waking up. Children are leaving for school, shopkeepers are opening their shutters, and the warm sun is spreading its light across the street. He takes a deep breath and feels a new kind of determination rising inside him. He knows the time has come to make a decision that will shape the next chapter of his life. For many weeks, he had been thinking about what direction he should take. Should he continue living the same routine, or should he make a brave move towards the dream he has been holding deep in his heart? He remembers the people who supported him, the promises he made to himself, and all the challenges he overcame. Every memory pushes him a little closer to the answer. After getting ready, he leaves the house and walks to the place where he usually sits when he needs peace. It is a small park near his home, simple but full of life. Children play on the swings, elders walk slowly on the walking track, and birds hop between the trees. Ayan sits on one of the benches and runs his fingers gently across the wooden surface. This place has seen his best and worst days. It has heard his hopes, his prayers, and his fears. While sitting, he watches a little boy trying to learn how to ride a bicycle. The boy keeps losing balance and falling, but he keeps standing back up. His father stands nearby, encouraging him with calm, supportive words. Ayan watches this scene with a soft smile. It is simple, yet powerful. The boy falls, but he does not give up. The father does not scold him, he guides him. The bicycle shakes, but it keeps moving forward. At that moment, Ayan realizes something important. Life is exactly like that bicycle. You learn by falling, and you grow by trying again. Ayan closes his eyes and thinks about the future he wants. He imagines himself working on something he truly loves, living with purpose, and building a life that reflects who he really is. For the first time in a long while, this dream feels possible. Maybe it won't be easy. Maybe the road will be long. But for the first time, he feels ready to take that first step toward it. When he opens his eyes, he sees his friend Hamza approaching. Hamza has known him since childhood, and their bond has stayed strong through every phase of life. Hamza notices the thoughtful look on Ayan's face and sits beside him quietly. He waits a moment before speaking, knowing that Ayan is not someone who likes to rush his words. "Something is on your mind," Hamza says gently. Ayan nods. "Yes, something important. I think it's time for a change." Hamza studies his face for a moment and then smiles. "I knew this day would come. You're not meant to stay where you are forever. You're meant to grow." Ayan feels grateful for Hamza's support. Having someone who understands without asking too many questions is a blessing. He explains his plan to Hamza, how he wants to step into a new direction, how he wants to chase a goal that he has been avoiding for fear of failure, and how he no longer wants to hold himself back. Hamza listens with complete attention and then places a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You have everything you need inside you," he says. "Courage, patience, and hard work. And you're not alone. I'm always with you." These words strengthen Ayan even more. With a deep breath, he makes up his mind. He stands up slowly like someone rising after a long, tiring chapter in life, but this time he rises with hope. Hamza stands up beside him, and together they begin walking out of the park. As they walk through the streets, Ayan notices small things he never paid attention to before. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the laughter of children chasing each other, the sound of vendors calling out to customers. These little details fill his heart with warmth. Life, even in its simplest moments, is beautiful when the heart is open to seeing it. They reach a small tea shop where they often spend time. They sit down, and the owner brings 2 cups of hot tea without even asking. He has watched them grow up and knows their habits well. The familiar atmosphere makes Ayan feel calm. As he takes a sip, he begins to outline the first steps of his plan. Hamza gives suggestions where needed, adding clarity and direction. Ayan decides that he will start small. He knows that rushing leads to mistakes, and patience builds strong foundations. He lists out what he needs to learn, who he needs to meet, and what resources he must gather. Every step feels like a brick being placed in the foundation of his future. As the sun sets, the warm orange light spreads across the sky, and Ayan realizes the day has passed faster than he expected. But he doesn't feel tired. Instead, he feels a strange energy, a mix of excitement and peace. He feels like someone who has finally understood his path after walking blindly for years. He returns home with light steps. For the first time in a long while, he feels sure of himself. He eats dinner with his family, smiling more than usual. His mother notices the change in his face and asks softly if he is okay. He gives her a gentle smile and says, "I'm better than okay." Later that night, Ayan sits at his desk with a notebook in front of him. He writes down everything he dreams of achieving. He writes without fear, without doubt, with a pure and open heart. As he finishes, he looks at the page and feels a deep sense of pride. This is not just a plan. This is his new beginning. He closes the notebook and places it beside him. The night outside is calm, the stars shining quietly. Ayan lies down on his bed and closes his eyes, feeling hope fill his chest like a warm light. He thinks about the challenges waiting for him, but they no longer scare him. He is ready to face them with courage and patience, and as he slowly drifts into sleep, only one thought remains in his mind: that sometimes life does not change in one big moment. It changes in small decisions, in quiet realizations, and in the courage to move forward even when the future is uncertain. Ayan has taken that step, and this time he knows he is walking toward something beautiful.